All right, well, I think we'll get started. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Mike Caldwell with Greater Des Moines Partnership, and you are joining the third session of our Raising Capital Seminar Series. This is on the Proforma. And for those of you, I think everybody here knows me real briefly. My background is in mobile computing and wireless technology, starting in the early 80s through the mid-2000s. After that, I went to work for the Greater Des Moines Partnership. I run their entrepreneurial initiatives. My wife and I are angel investors. I co-manage Plains Angels with Tej Davan and help start a couple of accelerators here in town, the Global Insurance Accelerator and the Iowa Agritech Accelerator. So relevant to today's presentation, I've probably built somewhere north of 400 financial models for different startups or helped build. I've seen about every unique business model you can imagine. And through that process, I watched a lot of people spend a tremendous amount of time trying to build their own financial model template. And if you've already done that, no problem. But you'll find that there are some really standard formats that, especially if you're in the software business, software as a service business, that investors expect. And we'll talk about some of those today. So I just dropped links to that as well. The template is free. It's an Excel template. And before we get there, no, it doesn't work in Sheets or Google spreadsheet or whatever. None of those things begin to match Excel's power, and I use a lot of their fairly powerful features. So it's a joint collaboration, this seminar series between the partnership, LWBJ, and Brown Winnick Law. We have a couple more seminars coming up in the near future. I'll talk about those in a minute. So feel free to keep your microphone muted. That does make things a little bit easier for those, like I said, who can. Please turn on your video. It's much easier to interact with all of you if I can see you. And if you prefer not to, I understand. And keep the chat open. That's a great place to ask questions. I'm totally open if somebody just wants to interrupt. Please do. This is not the most thrilling subject in the world. This isn't, great fiction here. So it's hard enough to do this with feedback. So please jump in. So the agenda for this series looks like this. We are on Module 3, the Proforma. Coming up next week, we'll be doing a seminar on cap tables. And on the 28th, we'll be doing a seminar on the term sheet. There is a seminar homepage I posted in the chat, and we will be updating that throughout the seminar series with all the latest videos, all the latest documents as we go. So that link is probably the one to hang on to of all of them, because it's pretty much where everything is kept. If you're looking for things longer term, if you want to share this with somebody, we openly share this with anyone who would like to utilize it. There's no fee for this. This is just all about helping people raise capital. So let's start, unless there are any questions to begin, let's start talking about this subject. So the reason we're here is to familiarize you with financial models for startup companies, what's expected from a startup company, and it's very different than what's expected from a publicly traded company, a small private company, etc. I do make this financial model available also at startupmodels.com. That's a domain I own. It is one of those things where you can contribute what you want. Please don't. I do this work for the partnership. They pay me very well. People who want to grab it from Europe or the UK, whatever, if they want to leave me $1 or $2, I'm fine with that. So 3 basic documents are what you're going to be asked for, and really only 2 when you are trying to raise equity capital. Profit and loss statement, cash flow statement, and balance sheet. And balance sheet's pretty rare these days. Every once in a great while, I run into a large corporate investment fund or kind of an old school fund that says, I want a balance sheet. And that's an interesting conversation. So why do you need these statements? And I'm going to speak to you today as an investor. So I've got my investor hat on today. I am looking at this as an angel investor and someone who advises people on how to raise capital. So everything you're going to get today is my perspective from the potential investor. And I hope that's beneficial to you, because for most of you, that's what you're facing. So at the end of the day, I want to know if you can make money. and I want to know how you can make money. And I want to know if you have enough cash to survive and thrive. Cash is blood and oxygen to our body. That's the equivalent. Without it, we're done. There are certain aspects of different kinds of companies, and we're going to cover both software and hardware companies today, very briefly, hardware companies, so you get a flavor for that. Even if you're not in the hardware business now, I think it's a good idea to spend it's about 20 minutes we talk about hardware just to get a flavor for what hardware means when you're building a model, when you get into things like inventory, et cetera. So here's some of the issues: product development, long cycles, long sell cycles, large inventory requirements. And at the end of the day, what's this company going to be worth? What's it worth now? And for most of you, the answer is 0 or I don't know. It's not valued. It can't be sold today, and that's fine. That's where everybody starts. And what do you think it's going to be worth in the future, and how did you determine that? So investors want a return on their investment. As an angel, I'm not a bank, and I'm not taking any lien on your house. So if you don't make it, I lose my money. It's just that simple. I lose all my money. It's happened to me more times than not. We expect a 10x return. If I put $500,000 in your company, which I don't put that much in any one company, believe me, but if I put that much money in, I'm expecting $5 million back. That sounds like robbery on the surface. Like, why would you get 10x? Okay, so here's the problem. The average qualified, experienced angel investor sees a strong return on 1 out of 10 of their investments. Just 1 out of 10. So to give you an idea what that means, if I make 10 50K investments, and I do it smart, and I do it over 2 years, and I find 10 really good companies, by the end of year 2, once I've made those investments, 8 of those companies will be gone, or they'll be what we call zombies. They're there, but they're never going to make it. So I've lost $400,000. It's gone. I'm down to 100K. And I put in 500,000. Now, if one company, if the normal thing happens, one will return my equity or maybe a little more. And that happens. And by the way, that's not a bad thing. I don't mind getting my money back if that's all that can happen. But let's say that happens. So now I'm still down 450K. I need to get 10x to even get close to what the S&P has been doing. And even with the bounces through COVID and some of the other stuff we've been through, short of an 08 again, the S&P is doing pretty darn good, right? And so it'd be a lot smarter for me to have thrown that 500K in the S&P and just said, I'll see it in 10 years. In fact, that's the Warren Buffett school of investing for those who aren't professional investors. It's what the advice he gave his wife. He said, when I die, put our money in the S&P. Don't worry about it. So you can see it's a really high risk game for an angel. Now, why do we do it? Well, I have one very tiny investment. I'm part of a syndicate that invested in a company called Calm, C-A-L-M, and they're still private. We were in the angel round. My current valuation in the private secondary market is about 130x return. Okay, that's what I really want. I'm looking for home runs. Okay, so when people come talk to you, understand their motivations, understand where they're coming from. There's a very, very well-known investor in town named Jim County. And when we kicked off Plains Angels, we had Jim come and speak to about 85 potential angel investors. And Jim's very well known. He's a philanthropist, very wealthy man. And he made his money in the cable television business, but this was a side of his cable deal. He said, I'm 51-7 on angel investing because I have had 51 go to 0 and 7 make money. And I'm way ahead. And the room just went silent. People were gasping because some of them just didn't understand that's what this is about. So real simple, a 500K investment for 10% of your company with a 10x return equates to a $50 million sale. You're telling me you can sell this company in 5 to 7 years for $50 million. A SaaS company with annual recurring revenue of 7.2 million at a 7x valuation is a $50 million company. SaaS or software as a service, in fact, right now, the valuations recently are running closer to 9x. You can see why everybody wants to own a software as a service company. They are extremely valuable. And we're looking for that exit to take place in 5 to 7 years. So if I haven't scared you to death, we'll keep going. So what's a P&L statement? Really simple one. Revenue minus the cost of going and getting that revenue. And by the way, in the software world, you have costs, and we'll talk about what those costs are. Gives you a gross margin, which means how much money do I have to run the business and pay everybody? Operating expenses, what are those expenses of running the business and paying everybody? And anything else left over is simple profit. Here's the thing, this is the two most important documents you're going to do are P&L and cash flow. And believe me, I can read a P&L sheet page and tell you a tremendous amount about your business. So put the time into this. It needs to be realistic. It needs to be grounded in realistic assumptions. And by the way, I know you don't know. And I was talking with Mark on a call the other day and said, the first thing you have to understand is everything you do there is going to be wrong. We know your numbers are wrong. We already know that. What we want to understand is the logic of how you got there. Did you flip a coin? Or did you make some assumptions about how quickly you could pick up a customer, who the first customer is going to be, or how your marketing campaigns would flow through as far as acquisition rates and customer acquisition costs? The first 12 to 18 months are critical. That's what we're usually looking at. Because you're usually not raising enough money for 5 or 7 years. You're usually raising enough money to get you through a year, maybe 18 months. A 3-year forecast is normally sufficient, but you're gonna hear people ask you for a 5-year forecast, which is insane, right? Imagine 2.5, 3 years ago making a 5-year forecast. Do you have COVID in there? I was helping some people in 08 do a forecast before the 08 crisis hit. That didn't work either. So we know stuff happens, but what they're trying to figure out is what do you aspire to? I would be totally happy investing in a company that sells for 50 million. Some investors wouldn't be at all. Some would say, look, if you're not north of 500 million valuation, I'm just not going to do it. It's not what I invest in. It's not an insult. It's just different investors have different goals. So they're trying to figure out, where do you see this company going? Here's an example of a real P&L statement, or a fictional reel, and we'll spend more time on this later. I know it's an eye chart. I'm not going to try to explain it all to you right here. So what's a cash flow statement? Real simply, how much cash did you begin the cycle with? This is a month. For example, month is the normal cycle. Did you bring any new investment or other cash in that was not related to directly doing business? Did you bring any revenue in? What were the expenses? And the difference here is not the operating expenses we talked about in the P&L, but how much money did you write checks for? And timing on that is critical. So the first thing you're going to learn is cash flows and P&Ls don't line up, because you paid payroll in March from a cash flow standpoint, but depending on how you account for your people's time, March may have had some February time in it. March payroll check may have had February time in it. You may be paying for inventory you sold 2 months ago, or sell 3 months from now. That gets you to your ending cash. So what did you end up at the end of the month with? And this is, again, your survival. So a cash flow statement looks something like this, month over month over month. How much did we start the year with? And if you look at the bottom there, it says we ended January with 201,000. We ended December with 410,000. And you'll see the bottom line says change in cash. This is the one I'm always looking for. How much did your cash change month over month? And there should be some negative months, right? I have met almost 0 companies that can start up and make money in the first month. I know one. Simply because the programmer was super talented and he'd already written the code. So cash flow management, this is crucial. If you don't demonstrate this in pretty much everything you're doing, you scare the investors away. Quite simply, you'll scare them away. Good business operators know how to manage their cash flow. They understand it and they know it on a daily basis. I was part of a company that grew to just under $1 billion a year. And from the time we went private until my leaving, I can guarantee you we all knew where our cash flow was. All the senior people knew where the cash flow was. You need to know your cash requirements. Be thrifty. You know, if you raise $5 million in a Series A, congratulations, but don't go buy a new car. And if you do buy a new car, don't drive it to investor meetings. I don't want to see your BMW. It'll just anger me. Delay hiring, slow down on hiring. Hire slow, fire fast is an old saw that I learned a long time ago, and it's even more relevant to a startup. Sometimes you have to reduce salaries. I have a company where the lady who is the CEO and the majority owner took no salary for 2.5 years, and it was tough on her and her husband. And there's a term called burn rate. Know your burn rate. How much cash are you burning every month? Because when you start up, you're going to be spending more than you're bringing in. And there's gross burn and net burn, but basically I look at net. How much cash went out net of operations of the business? You should always have a detailed cash flow forecast, at least 180 days in length. And when I mean detailed, I mean detailed. You really should know it for a couple of years minimum. Everybody's third and fourth year cash flow forecast, unless you're in the biosciences space, it's green. You know, the life is good, cash is coming in. We know that that's what you hope will happen, but we're really worried about how to get to the green. Balance sheets. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. The problem is, as a startup, you don't have any assets, but you got a lot of liabilities. So putting a balance sheet together is a nice exercise, but at the end of the day, forecasting balance sheets is a bit of an art. So I don't hardly ever see this anymore. In the appendix documents, if you're really interested in balance sheets, I found a really great article on the web and put that into the appendix as a document worth reading. Very simple on what is a balance sheet and how does it work. So I'm not going to get into this. It's not the same as valuation, but I want you to know it's possible you'll hear somebody ask you about it. Okay, this is a big one for people who have never raised equity capital. Financial models are not accounting statements. They're barely related. Okay, an accounting statement is fact. Fact as good as we possibly know. And if it's audited fact under the penalty of law and lawsuit, financial models are pure forecasts. It's what we think will happen. And we know they're incorrect. That's understood. But they're the absolute critical part of planning your business. When someone says, I have a great idea, and I hear that a lot, and that's part of my job. Part of my job is to suss out with them, could you ever make money doing this? Right? It may be a great idea. There's a lot of great ideas out there, but a great idea does not have very much to do with a great product. And a great product doesn't have all that much to do with a great company. And that's hard-won knowledge of my own, having been through those processes. So they're critical and they're ongoing. You are not done when you get your model put together. It's something you should be updating every month at the minimum. And again, I refer here to a blog post that all these that I refer to are in the appendix from Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures, which is a amazingly successful VC firm on the East Coast. They actually are well known to me because they invested in Dwala. Fred is a great writer. He writes short, to the point blogs. If you want to read a good blog on a daily basis, Fred's are one of the best. So in summary, the documents matter. They matter a lot. I'm going to read them in detail, and so are most other investors. An experienced banker investor can tell an amazing amount from your financials, an amazing amount. It's really worth time to have an experienced mentor advisor review these before you pass them on to others. I am available to all of you on this call to help you with your financials. If you want help putting a financial model together, if you want to review it with me, it's a lot of what I do. And I am available to anybody in Central Iowa. That's paid for by the partnership. If you're outside Central Iowa and you want some help, drop me a note. We'll figure something out. But get comfortable with these financials, get comfortable with those numbers, because I'm going to be asking you questions about something in year 2, in quarter 2. And if you have to look in detail to find what I'm talking about, if it's obvious, I'll start wondering your strength in financials. And that's okay if you're not strong in financials, but just understand it's part of judging a startup. And finally, this is advice that applies in a lot of other places. Don't pretend to know what you don't know. If you don't know, tell us. That's fine. We get it. If you've got a great company, we can help you find somebody to help you manage the finances. So there's several steps in building a financial model. Step 1 is the revenue model. And by the way, we're going to spend 90% of today's day building a revenue model, and the other 10% talking about product development, sales, marketing, general operating, and people expenses, because the truth is all of those come out of figuring out your sales model. Figuring out your sales model is figuring out, am I direct sell, indirect sell? Do I pay commission? Do I not pay commission? Do I use manufacturer's reps or don't I? How long is my sales cycle? All those things that you got to go figure out will influence, first of all, will drive the revenue model and influence all the other parts of this process. So the revenue model drives the business and the expenditure structure, the people, the marketing, the sales costs. You're focusing, if you're a physical product company, you're all on cash cycles. The time that you put cash out to the time you get it back. And we'll talk much more about that later. If you're a software as a service company, you're focused on sales cycle. From first contact with a customer that's interested, let's say in a demo, to check in the bank, how long is that? That's a huge, huge question. So I'm going to go through, most of this course is going to be through example. And some of these companies are real and some of them are fictitious. Please understand all the financials are totally fictitious. They're realistic in the sense of being realistic to a company, but they're not the numbers from these operating companies. So ClinicNote, this is a software as a service. Oh, I got a question. As a startup, if we raise seed funds with the convertible note, how relevant are the financial documents? Absolutely relevant. I want to know how you're going to make money long term. I want to understand just as much as if I was in a Series A. Absolutely relevant. Because I'm betting on you not building a great product, but betting on you building a great company. So ClinicNote software as a service company. They do a electronic health record for speech pathologists and audiologists. And they do something very interesting is that they actually have teaching tools built into this product. It's been around for about 4 years now. It's very successful. So they have two ways of going to market, potentially. Direct sale to both universities and private practices. And so if you think about this, and we'll go into this more, universities, large organization, lots of time, you time with the start of the semester, so that gets into when does cash come in, when do you need to be ramped up. So I can tell you, because most of their sales are universities, their revenue is really lumpy, or especially their cash. It all comes in during 2 periods, right? Right after the fall semester starts and right after the spring semester starts, which makes for an interesting financial model, because if your revenue is only coming in for about, I'd say 90% of the revenue comes in 4 months, right? 2 2-month periods. That makes for an interesting model. They also sell to private practice, totally different. Somebody may look at a demo one day, buy the product the next day, self-on board, and pay with a credit card. And they're either a monthly or yearly payment coming in. So those cycles are very, very quick. Now, it is common to have an indirect sale or assisted sale in the software as a service world. It's very common, whether it's a value-added reseller taking your product and applying it to a specific industry that perhaps you don't know well. It could be referral marketing, which is a very strong way to market, especially in today's day. Referral marketing is probably the single strongest way to market. And I've seen some very successful companies live on 100% referral marketing. Currently, ClinicNote is not using an indirect channel. So if we look at a little bit more at their model, universities, ACV, average contract value, and by the way, these terms are important, $6,700. They pay it upfront, they pay it yearly. And there's no direct cost of sale. When I say direct costs, I mean that ClinicNote does not have to expend cash to close a sale. Now they expend time, but they're not expending cash. The private practice average contract value is $150 a month or $1,200 a year. And there's some marketing reasons you give a great discount for a yearly subscription, and there's some operational reasons. So I won't get into that here, but it's not uncommon to do something like this as one reason might be, I'm not really sure I want to use it. Okay, we'll pay the monthly fee until you're sure, and then switch over to yearly. It'll save you a bunch of money. So if we look at the sell cycle, and I'm trying to represent this on a line graph. So basically we're looking at 180 days of cycle time. prospect demo on day one. So whenever we give a demo, the clock starts on the sales cycle because somebody actually takes the time to get a demo as a potential buyer. Usually with the university, you'll hear a verbal yes in as little as 30 days, and worst case 60, so I put it at 45. But that's just the beginning. Now, because it's university, you have to go through IT review. And by the way, we're talking about health records here, so something called HIPAA comes into play. And while there is not a formal HIPAA certification, it's on the IT department's responsibility list to make sure that this thing meets HIPAA requirements. And that's not simple. And to give you a little bit of an idea, over the course of 4 years, Lana has built a document that she has available for these IT people she sends in advance of this process that's over 200 pages. That is a deep assessment of the product that was put together, covering almost every area you could imagine, a few that you might not imagine, about what it means to be HIPAA compliant. Next comes contract review in the legal department. And yes, this can happen in parallel, but legal doesn't get too excited until IT says, yeah, okay, it's all right. And a good friend of mine, Jeff Russell, Jason knows him as well, has a saying when it comes to lawyers. He says, review it, but don't add value, which is a nice way of saying don't rewrite it, okay? Now here's the problem. In universities with a new vendor, if you're new and you don't have 20 universities already signed up, you go to UNI, and we did go to UNI with this. UNI uses the product. If they're the first university, they're going to read this with a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to talk to your attorney for hours, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. Now, once you're down the road a long ways, and you can say, well, Penn State signed it, UCLA signed it, Stanford signed it, U of I signed it, UW signed it, then the attorney's like, oh, okay, I'll read it. And then just kind of read through it. But understand, when you're ramping up that first time and you have that first contract customer, it's going to get read in detail, and it's going to take a lot of time. With universities then, once you have all those approvals, there's an onboarding process. And again, this aligns with a semester. So keep in mind that just because you sold it in July doesn't mean you're going to get onboarding in August. If you're lucky, you'll onboard in September. If you're not lucky, you'll onboard in January. So in the end of the day, the university pays about 30 to 45 days after the onboarding's done and they're satisfied. In this case, we're talking about 6 months. And for Atlanta, this is a quick sale. Now, there have been quicker, and I'll tell this story just to give you an idea of how your assumptions can be invalidated. So when Lana first started out with ClinicNote, universities were not in her picture. She was selling private practice. But she went to this seminar or this trade show, and there were a lot of university people there. And she did it more to learn than anything, got a little booth and just talked to a lot of people. And a gal that ran a very large speech pathology clinic came up to her, took a long demo right in the booth and asked her right there, what does this cost? If I want this for my university, what's it going to cost? And Lana, being a pretty sharp person, said, well, I think I could do it for $10,000 a year. And the gal goes, great, sold. Let's get it done. And 3 months later, they were installed. Well, if you use that lady's sell cycle as your norm for planning, she was what's called an early adopter, and early adopters move quick and they can completely destroy your modeling. So you may have an early adopter or two in your mix, and they're ready to go, or they're the type that just says, yes, let's do it. And you've probably all met people like that. They're not that common. So even though your first customer or two may close very quickly, don't make the assumption that that's what everybody else is going to do. Okay, so let's look at the financial impact of a university direct sale. Now, if you read my little eye chart closely, you'll notice that while the cash flow sheet shows us bringing in $6,500 in February for a sale, we got a check, and we got our money right away, you'll notice that we're not taking $6,500 of income up on the revenue line. And this is because there's a GAAP rule or an accounting rule called revenue recognition. And what it says is if you're licensing a piece of software to a company or a person for a period of time greater than 30 days, and I'm not giving you the rule, but I'll give you the rough version of the rule. You have to spread the revenue recognition over that period of time. So in this case, 12 months, you would take your $6,500, divide it by 12, and apply it for the next 12 months. And that's how you recognize that revenue. And so even though we brought $6,500 in cash in, we only showed, and that was in February, we're only showing $42,500 in total revenue. Now this model actually shows a sale every month, but you can see what happens is we're picking up $542 a month per customer, and you can see how it builds over time. So if you look at this now, at the end of the year, we're showing $42,500 in revenue, and then we're showing $81,000 in cash. This is a cash forward business in the sense of how it produces cash flow, because we get paid in advance. This is a huge question, is when do you get paid? And as a startup, you want to be paid in advance. You want to do everything you can to get paid up front, including giving very deep discounts. It's not uncommon in the software world to see people give 20, 30% discounts privately to get cash up front, because that discount's way cheaper than diluting the value of your company by taking additional equity investment. So knowing when you're going to get paid and setting your business up so you get paid up front is a huge, huge deal. So in a private practice sale, the timing looks very different. We do a demo on day 1, we get a yes on day 3. They onboard, practice pays, sometimes in 3 days, like instant, okay? So the referral sale will be similar to this in the sense it'll be very, very quick. So you're going to likely have a business model that says, my product goes to market A or niche A with this financial model, and market B or customer B, type B, with a different financial model. So it's not unified. You don't want to have 10 of these, right? But in her case, you can see there's 2 very distinct customers types with 2 very different sell cycles. And if you didn't model that correctly, you would not have a good idea of how this is going to get paid and how you're going to bring in money. So I won't spend a lot of time here, but the very top chart that's yellow just shows the number of new licenses per month sold. The kind of greenish line underneath that says renewal sales are the people renewing monthly. And this is, again, if you want to spend some time dealing with, so it just shows what happens when you're selling new customers every month and getting the renewals every month. So, you know, here we are in November with 18 new customers and 144 renewals. That's a pretty nice business. You can start to see why they're very, very valuable. So I won't spend any time there. So in summary, on ClinicNote, the sales cycle, everybody underestimates this. Most by a factor of 2 or 3. So one of the things I'm going to do to your financials when I'm looking at them is I'm going to just kind of do the math in my head to say, well, what would happen if their sales cycle doubled or tripled? Will they survive? Can they make it? So, and obviously from this example, different customers have different sales cycles. Some are large and slow, some are small and fast. I'm not a big fan of selling to Fortune 500 kinds of companies. They're terribly slow. They take forever. I like mid-sized companies where the founder is many times heavily a heavy part of the cap table. They move aggressively. Their whole business model is to move fast. It's a lot easier to sell to companies that move quickly for 2 reasons. 1, because you'll get a sale quickly, and 2, because you'll get a no quickly. And believe me, the second best answer in the world is no, because maybe means you got to keep chasing them forever, and you can starve to chasing people. So let's talk about a fictitious company. I made this one up. Let's say we're doing an app. All right, and we all know that from listening to all the banter about how much money Apple makes in the App Store, there's a lot of money to be made in apps. So let's say we've created an app called Sports Knowledge, and we can sell it for a $4.95 month subscription. Put it on the App Store, Google, Apple, and to date, they still all charge 30% I find it kind of funny that Google's complaining about Apple when they charge the same amount, but they do. Here's what the sell cycle looks like. Once you get your product out there, you're selling product hopefully every day. And Google and Apple vary a little bit, but generally they pay every 30 days. So you're just going to get a flow of money coming in. If you sell physical product on Amazon, I happen to do that. I get money every 2 weeks transferred via ACH to my checking account for my business. Just every 2 weeks, whatever I sold, I get the net proceeds, comes in like clockwork. So it's a very quick cycle for cash and selling. Financial impact. If you can make this work, this is a heck of a way to make a lot of money, all right? There are people who've written an app, put it out there, and made a tremendous amount of money. I'll give you an example. In iPhone 14, it turns out they have these little widgets you can put on the screen now. That's new to Apple. And there was a designer recently that I think she came up with something she said was a very minimalist look. And for fun, she created a bunch of widgets and fonts and just threw them out there on the App Store for fun. She made $100,000 in 7 days. Okay. Will she have a business in a month? I don't know, right? I mean, this whole thing, there may be 10,000 people doing widgets by the end of the year, and then it's not worth anything and the market gets saturated. How many of you remember the kids' phenomena called bands? The little rubber bands that when you laid them down were the shape of a horse or, whatever, right? Star shape, whatever. They were a big deal. The person who started that company, I don't know the person's name, as they grew it, realized it was a bubble company. And they ran that company permanently on the idea that they could shut down in 90 days. Because they knew it would bust, right? It was a boom bubble market that would bust. The kids would all find something new to get interested in. So it's kind of an interesting thought to think about, but the app stores could be the same way. I won't spend a lot of time on these financials, but you tend to get an idea that if you don't get a lot of renewals, let's just say it cost you $10 to get a customer, $10 in advertising to get somebody to pay $4.95 a month. If those people aren't renewing at a high rate, you don't have business. If you're spending $10 a customer and they stick around for 2 years, which is basically $120, you've got a great business. So that's the net of that without getting into a lot of it. Cash flow is wonderful. They send you a check every 30 days or an ACH payment every 30 days. So it's a deceptively simple model. It is truly that simple. The hard part's the marketing, right? And it's kind of, I won't say it's winning the lottery, but are you a great poker player? And oh, by the way, you can still lose. So you've got to really have something special to make this work. Any question on software-based, high-level sell cycle, and just how you approach this before we get to the hardware companies? All right. So 2 companies here. These are both real companies. Pardon me, my throat's a little sore and I don't have COVID, but my throat's a little sore, so I'll be drinking some water. Lil Sidekick was founded by a mom here in Polk City, Iowa, and FarrPro was founded by an Iowa grad, and it's a vertical market product. So the first one's mass market, the second one's vertical market. So Lil Sidekick, real simple. This lady had a little boy that her little boy's nickname was the Chucker. If you gave him anything, he chucked it or he threw it. Immediately threw it away. And anybody that's been around kids, know kids love to throw things. She also has a product that's a flavored teether, but we're just going to talk about the tether. So she created this medical grade, flexible, soft plastic tether to tether just about anything to whatever you want to tether it to, the sippy cup to the stroller. And she made it in a very, it sounds pretty straightforward, right? Big deal. But she actually made it in a way that it has breakpoints built into it. So if the kid was trying to somehow found them a way to hang themselves with it, it would break. That's kind of the net of it. So fairly complex product. Took her like 3 years to get it to market. She has 5 revenue models. She sells to Walmart and a couple other big box stores. She sells on Amazon. She sells through distribution to small shops. She sells international, and you can even buy it on her website. And every one of these have different prices different costs based on volume, different timing, and different payment terms on when people pay her. Now, I'm not covering all these, but I'm just giving you an idea. When you get in the hardware business, this gets complex. So cash cycles, everything here. So cash cycle, my definition is the amount of time from the point when you start spending money on a customer to when the customer pays you back, when the cash is back in the bank. That's going to dictate success and failure in a physical product company. So let's take the Walmart example. And these numbers aren't true, but by the way, she's in something like 4,000 Walmarts. So she's done pretty well for herself. And did it, basically her and her husband helped her part-time. That was it. We have about a 25% margin with Walmart in this company, and that's pretty common. Retail products don't have great margins, right? That's just not the case. Weekly, Walmart wants her to deliver 10,000 units at $4 units, $4 per unit. That's their PO, okay? Let's take that as a given. 10,000 units a week, $4 on order per unit. Cost is 3, that's where we get the 25% margin. So it's a 40K revenue, 30K cost. We make 10 grand every week, right? Sounds good. So let's think about this for a minute. The impact of weekly 40K orders. Every week, starting 30 days later, they owe 30K to the manufacturer. It's 7 orders before Walmart pays for the first 40K order. They're down $230,000 before they get $1 back. This is the cash cycle. A Walmart order is placed. She places a manufacturing order the next day. She gets her product back from the manufacturer and has to pay them when she gets it, which is not a bad set of terms. She then ships the order to Walmart. They receive it, and then they pay it in about 60 days. So let's look at the bottom, the cash flow. We start with $10,000 in the bank. And this is just a modeling exercise. Obviously, you'd have to have more than that to do this, but it's one of the ways I model companies. I start with nothing in the bank. Let's just run a model. Let's run a 3-year model with no money in the bank, because at some point we're going to realize where the bottom is, and that's going to tell us a lot about how much cash we need. So here we are bringing in these costs of goods, 120K, right? 30K a week, and this is 4-week months, 120K a month going out to my manufacturer every month. And then that starts in February. Then in April, I start getting 160K a month back from Walmart, all right? It's 8 months to get back to 10K. 8 months to get back to cash break even, just to even be positive again. Now, this works long term, it's pretty darn good. And the P&L says we're making money. And we are making money, but the timing says you need a lot of cash. So let's look at a different model she has. This is the only one we'll cover, by the way. International. When you sell retail products internationally, there's something really cool about it. The distributor that buys it pays at the time of shipment. She sells a lot in Asia. In Asia, US-made products are extremely highly valued. She has about a 40% margin when she sells internationally. She has a very high minimum order because, again, these are distributors, and she doesn't want to, shipping internationally is a real pain in the rear, by the way. Her minimum order is 1,000 units at $7.50 a unit. Her unit cost, because this is lower volume, is $4.50. Now, why isn't it $4? Well, it probably is, but to have these models be separated, you can't just assume the Walmart business is always going on. So in modeling, you say, I'm going to model a $4.50 cost because I can actually call up the manufacturer by 1,000 units and buy them at $4.50. Whereas if I buy 10,000 units, I can buy them at $4. Again, another complexity of physical product companies. If you wanted 100,000 of these a week, every week, boy, could you get them inexpensively. So let's look at that. We have a 33-day cash cycle because we get an order, we place the order, we get the product, we turn around, we ship it right back out, and we get paid before we ship it, literally before we ship it, 33 days. This is cash positive day 1. because we got our cash basically the day we were supposed to pay or before we were supposed to pay the manufacturer. Depending on your terms, it's totally cash positive. Great business to be in. Any questions on this example? All right, here's something that's a vertical market product, and a lot of you do look at vertical markets. I don't know if anybody's doing a physical product, and I won't spend a ton of time on this. If you are doing a physical product, I'm very good at this. That's the business I was in for 22 years. Happy to talk to you in detail. But let's talk about this product. FarrPro Solutions creates something called the Haven. It is a product that helps baby pigs survive the first few weeks of life. And I won't get into the technology, but it is pretty cool technology. They have two revenue models: a direct sale to large producers. The hog market in the United States, and for the most part across the world, is a market where a very few companies control the vast majority of the supply. And I think something like 80 or 90% of all hogs produced come through about 6 company entities, and the rest come from a whole bunch. So large sales, direct, they'll do a pilot first, then they'll roll out. Then there's the value-added reseller, really common in the farm world because you've got a lot of small farmers and you're not going to reach those directly with any efficiency at all. So let's talk about the direct sale cash cycle and what that looks like. So their list price in this example is $9.95. The average sale price is $7.42. So why is there an average sale price, not a list price? Well, because discounts happen. And if you really are going to get down to modeling things, the company that orders 1,000 of these is going to get a much better deal than the person that orders 10. Margins are going to vary 39 to 54%, depending on the volume ordered. Customers pay 30 days after their order is received, and you have 60 days from order to delivery by the manufacturer. So when you place an order, it takes 60 days to get it. And this is another one where a fast sales ramp up. The faster you want to grow, the more cash you need. And so there are times in the hardware business where you don't want to try to figure out how to grow as quickly as possible. The market you're going to focus on isn't the biggest one to begin. The market you're going to focus on to begin is the one that returns cash the quickest. So it's the first thought is go after the biggest market, right? Well, maybe not. If you have a physical product that's in the retail space, doing it on Amazon is a lot more efficient because you get your cash so much more quickly and you can get up and get going. Can you get huge on Amazon? It's hard. You probably need Best Buy and Target and the others to get huge, but those take a lot of cash. So it is really common in the physical product world to offer discounts for cash in advance or cash on delivery. This is extremely common. In the old days, invoices would come with 210 net 30, meaning we'll give you a 2% discount if you'll pay in 10 days or net 30 days. The net amount's due in 30 days. Right now, cash isn't worth much. If you're someone like Apple sitting on untold billions of dollars in cash, the truth is you can't get a lot of money for your cash. So sometimes the accounting and the finance works out that says, well, take the discount. You know, give them their cash up front if you trust them and take the discount. It's better for our margins, right? Why not? So in times like these where cash is very low value, there's a very strong argument for you to make as someone selling software or hardware to someone to pay up front for a discount. Direct sales model looks something like this. Customer order placed on day 1, you're going to be shipping the order around day 60, and the customer is going to pay you in about 90 days, so about a 90-day cycle, okay? This one, very similar to the Walmart example, if we said we're selling a certain number every month, I don't remember the exact number, but you can see the revenue recorded going up pretty fast, meaning we're ramping up, we're selling to a couple big producers, they're buying more and more every month. In this example, you're basically looking at 6 months to get to cash flow positive. And you're looking at the bottom, that red circle of 587, that's the lowest point your cash gets to, negative 587. The reason I point out that lowest cash number, people say, well, how do I figure out how much money I need? Well, this is one of the pieces you can do, software or hardware, is to say, again, start your business model with no cash in the bank. Put in all your expenses, put in all your assumptions on sales, and figure out where this bottom is. What's the lowest ending cash balance you hit? So this one says our lowest cash balance is 587. Well, you probably need more than that. First of all, this model doesn't have everything in it, but even if that was the total cash, you better have some insurance. You know, you better be able to operate for 3 to 6 months beyond that. So I'm a big fan, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but take the bottom of your cash flow number, whatever that is, and then add to that some additional costs for managing the operation for a period of time. And I'll actually give you an equation on how to do that later in this presentation. But again, let's say this thing took off like a fiend, and this big producer said, I want to start getting $1,000 a month. Well, I'd be talking to them about cash, because I would not have the money to do that. And you're not going to go to a bank and get a loan on a PO right now. That's not going to happen. The indirect cash cycle is a little different. List price $9.95. Sale price, the average is lower. And it's lower because the distributor is doing a lot of the work. So if you're the one selling direct to a large producer, you've got a lot of work to do. It's your salesperson, you're compensating them, you're doing all the support on the product, et cetera. So a distributor is going to get a better deal simply because they do a lot of the work. And in most cases, the reason you use a distributor is because they own the relationship. If I'm a distributor in Eastern Iowa for a series of farm agricultural products, I know my farmers well. And if I'm really interested in a product or believe in a product, I can go to them and say, you need to try this, and they're going to listen to me. My manufacturers that I represent don't have that relationship, and they don't want to spend the money to build a relationship. It's not worth it to sell $10,000 of the product at 40 points of margin, and maybe only sell them once. So that's the reasoning for using independent distributors or some distributor model. You'll hear them called distributors, value-added resellers. There's lots of different versions, but in essence, you're paying someone else through reduced margins to do part of the work to get a sale. So the distributor pays on order received. So their margins are lower, 60 days from order to delivery again. And again, you're still going to need a lot of cash to ramp up. This is more of a 65, 70 days sell cycle for you. But the good news is, because they're paying you earlier, you're getting your cash, you're getting back to cash flow positive earlier, right? It's a quicker amount of time, takes less cash. If anybody ever wants me to take you through one of these examples in detail, I'm happy to do it. But believe me, it's kind of like watching paint dry to go through these numbers in absolute detail. So physical product costs change over time. This is an added complexity of doing a physical product company. There are, I would say, 5 general phases of costing. There's the cost of a prototype, very expensive. There's a cost to build testing products, the number of products you need for testing and certification products. There's the selling part of this and building product for selling. And then there's the, we're going to get big. We're going to be like Apple and, you know, manufacture millions per month. As you look at cost, you want to optimize for the selling phase. And what that means is you're going to want to lose some money on some early product, right? If your first units for pilot cost you $100 each to build and your retail price is $89, that's okay. Assuming that when you get to volume, they cost you 14 or 24, right? I see too many people get wound up in, oh, I got to buy 5,000 of them now so I can get a better price. Well, what happens if they're wrong? You have 5,000 products to throw away. And this is a really common mistake. So when you know you need 10 units for testing, but they're going to cost 3 times list price, pay 3 times list price and buy only 10 units. Learn from the testing. When it's time to do certification, you need 50 units to do certification. They cost full retail, pay full retail. It's okay. Because if you find out through certification they don't work and you need a design change, you're only throwing away 50 units, not 500 or 5,000. And then don't get caught up in believing that you can sell a tremendous number all at once. So if your first optimal number, the lowest optimal number you could buy is 500, buy 500. Don't buy 5,000 for the discount. Prove to yourself you can sell them 500 at a time first. And once you really have done that well, then make the jump to 5,000. Here's another added complexity of modeling for complex products. Complex products means something that has bolts, nuts, screws, has lots of pieces or parts, whatever it is. Heck, even a physical product that goes, let's say it's a herbal supplement. There's a lot of pieces to that. There's labels, there's the bottle, there's the cap, there's the product that's inside. By the way, there's the packaging for 6 of them, and then there's the carton for 60 packs of 6. So there's a lot going in there. And the thing is, you're not going to buy exact quantities each time for each part, because things like labels are cheap if you buy a roll of 1,000 at a time, whereas maybe the containers you buy are expensive, so you don't buy 1,000 at a time. And you get into minimum order quantities, and all this keeps making for a very complex decision about, well, how, what's my model look like? There's some ways to do these models, some assumptions you can make. Happy to talk through them. I just want you to understand that the complexity is there. So in summary, different selling approaches. Each one is very likely targeted to a different kind of customer. You have to look at the profitability, cash flow, and resource requirement of each approach. They're not the same. Because sell through a reseller is totally different than selling direct. Let's be honest, building out a national sales team is expensive. Let's say you're doing software as a service for, I'm going to pick on insurance because I know it, for the insurance industry. Well, you need people in quite a few cities because the insurance industry is very concentrated in a few cities, and you're going to need teams. You're going to need a true salesperson. You're going to need somebody with the systems knowledge, implementation knowledge, training knowledge. You might be putting 20, 25 people out over time to cover the entire United States insurance marketplace. That's a lot of money. And it takes a lot of margin away from your business. So there may be another way to sell through a partner that already owns a relationship with those people. That's an upside. The downside is the partner owns the relationship and they can change your stuff out for somebody else's someday. International, we look at this cash friendly because we pay up front. Focus on biggest long-term opportunity and keep in mind who owns the customer relationship. So if you want your customer to be your company to be valuable, the acquirer wants to know they're not just acquiring some sales, they want to know they're acquiring customer brand equity. The customers believe in you, they know you, they want your stuff, right? Not somebody else's. So just to summarize the physical product cash cycle, and then we'll take a break. Selling a physical product with extended terms and low margins, a brutal, brutal business. So let's just look at this comparison down here because sometimes it works out okay. 10% gross margin on a product you sell 50 times a year may be good if the cash cycle is 10 days and you pay net 30. That actually is a good business. A 50% gross margin on a product you sell once a year is probably bad if the cash cycle is 9 months. So don't get caught up in margin, margin, margin. It's a combination of margin and timing. Grocery stores are very profitable and they don't make a lot of margin on their product. And once you get past that beginning cash crunch, these are very lucrative. I mean, don't kid yourself. Apple makes a lot of money, right? They're a physical product company extraordinaire. They make very, very good money. So a couple of points just to consider here. You want to focus on your margins over time. As you grow your company, that's when to focus on it. People that get too focused on their margin too early can really cause wrinkles in their business, problems in their business. Lots of ways to do that in physical products. Gaining better payment terms from your manufacturer. So Lil Sidekick, to go back to that little plastic strap, once she got Walmart really nailed down, she went to the Lil Sidekick people and made a deal with them where she paid a little bit more per product and they gave her 90-day terms. And it totally inverted her cash cycle. And part of the reason they did that was because she could give them a long-term forecast so they could plan, and they're actually running huge volumes infrequently where they get the best optimization of their factory, and then shipping when she needs them. And beware of commission sales long-term. You pay commission to build a relationship, not, in most cases, not to maintain a relationship. It's very common in the early stage to pay big commissions to sell stuff, and that's great. But long-term, you want a relationship so solid that you don't need a person selling. You need a person maintaining and improving the relationship. And that's where you see people like customer relationship managers versus salespeople. And the difference is customer relationship managers aren't heavily commissioned. Salespeople, the term I've heard used is hunters and farmers. Salespeople, in the classic sense, are hunters. They go hunt the new deal. Farmers are the people that maintain what they have. They take that ground and they grow it and they grow it and they grow it, and every year they make it a little better. All right, let's stop there. Let's take, it's 9:33. Let's take a break till 9:45, and we'll come back then. All right, so I'll tell you a story about Dell Computing from their early days. And this just demonstrates the strategic use of a cash model. In the early days of PCs, you went to a store like Best Buy, if they even existed yet, and there was an early one in my hometown, and you bought a PC off a shelf, and it was a box. It's probably 2 boxes, a monitor and a CPU unit, and that was all pre-configured. And so if you think about that cash model, cash cycle, it's probably 120 to 180 days of cash from the time that those boxes were, all the parts were built, when they were shipped to the final assembler, built and then put into boxes, and because of their weight, put on a boat and sent across the Pacific Ocean. You probably talk about 90 to 180 days of cash cycle. Well, Michael Dell came up with this idea, and the urban legend that I believe is true, I believe it's a true story, he came at it with a very different approach. And that is that at the time, and I believe still to this day, if I sell you a standard product via the phone or internet, I can't charge your card until I ship it. But if I sell you a custom product, I can charge you the second I complete the order, okay? So what Dell did was build his new website where you bought a Dell desktop or even a laptop so that there were no standard products. You had to select how much hard drive, how much memory, what display do you want, which keyboard do you want, whatever the combination was. And what that meant was, rather than getting paid 100 and some days after the cash was put out there, he got paid upfront. So he literally has money the next day. And what he did was he went to the vendors and said, I'll cut you a deal. Your normal payment terms are 90 days. That's normally how long it takes for you to get paid for stuff you send. If you co-locate with me in the same area or next door, I'll pay you in 10 days. So from 90 days payment to 10, and they're like, yeah. And I think he even gave him a little more margin, but paid him in 10. So if you think that through, he takes an order on day 1, he gets the money from the bank on day 2. On day 3, he starts building the product and accesses the inventory of his partners. And let's say he gets it built on day 3, he sends it out on day 4. We get it on day 7. Well, 10 days after day 3, he pays for those parts, day 13. Every deal makes his cash pile taller. Sound that an interesting story? All right, so let's talk about back to software as a service and some of the dynamics of a software as a service model. And again, I would encourage you to ask questions, unmute and talk. Let's have that. All right, there are a bunch of famous terms that you're going to hear about in the world of software as a service. And investors know them well, so you'll need to know them too. The first one is thankfully starting to be less important because I'm not a big fan of it. It's called the LTV to CAC ratio. And basically CAC is customer acquisition cost. So this is the total sales and marketing expenses for a period, let's say a year, divided by the number of net new customers acquired. Net new customers acquired equals the customer acquisition cost. you spend 100 grand in total sales and marketing expenses, including people's time, by the way, and you got 20 new customers from that $100,000, your CAC is $5,000. The lifetime value is the average monthly revenue per customer times the customer's lifetime in months. How long will they stay? And the ratio says you divide the LTV by the CAC. Now, here's the problem with that. Anybody with a decent stats background knows you don't know lifetime value. That's just a wild guess, okay? It's a guess. You don't know. And even after you went through a whole cycle of customers, you still don't know because it's going to change. And by the way, e-commerce is a totally different LTV. So if you're in the e-commerce game, that's a different game. So we'll talk about a different ratio and a different setup in a minute with LTV to CAC, but let's just walk through the example. So let's say with ClinicNote, and this isn't too far from what it was a couple of years ago, the yearly sales and marketing cost was about $71,000. Their average revenue was $6,500. They had 21 new customers in the last period. The average life of the customers has been estimated to be 4 years. Turns out it's going to be higher. So their customer acquisition cost was $71,000 divided by 21 customers, or $3,381. Their LTV of $6,500 a year times 4 years, $26,000. So you can see they got a nice ratio, 7.7. That's pretty good leverage when you think about just the amount of leverage you're getting out of the money spent. And that's really what this gets down to. But there's a much better way to do this. And it's much more important to what I think is the investor and the startup, and that's MTR, months to repay, because I'm a cash flow person, right? Early stage companies, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. So if you look at it this way, ClinicNote, again, in that same example, has a CAC of $3,381, average contract value of $6,500. MTR focuses on the payback period on that CAC, meaning 6.2 months. They literally, if it was just a little better, they could get 2 customers a year out of the same money. So the better MTR you have, the less cash you need. So it's the cash flow impact that matters. And you know, you've got some of these unicorn types that just raise silly amounts of money. I need another 100 million, big deal. Well, that's not 99% of the startups. 99% of the startups are trying to figure out how to be as efficient with their cash as possible. So again, the CAC includes labor, right? And if you're not paying yourself, honestly, you should estimate your CAC as what if I had to pay a person competent pay, good pay for a competent person to do that job. But it's a good way to really look at your business model. Does this business model at a higher level than writing a super detailed plan, figure this one out, and it will tell you a ton about your business. So I'm a big fan of this metric. And I encourage you to really think that through in any software business you're looking at. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but just to re-hit this, GAAP accounting rules say that software is recognized over the time that it's provided. So over time of service, 12-month sales, $6,000, recognized $500 a month. Straightforward, very critical that you understand this, because somebody might ask you, are you doing your model cash or GAAP? Meaning a cash model says, I got $6,000 in, and I took $6,000 of revenue that month. Early stage, you could do that if you want. It's not a good idea because anybody that's looking to invest is going to want to see this from more of an accounting perspective or revenue recognition. So you're better just to start out that way. So what is the cost of revenue with SaaS? Some people say, well, there is no cost of revenue. Well, yes, there is. First of all, if you get big, your AWS bill or your Google bill or your Microsoft Azure bill is going to be big. It's expensive to buy a lot of time in a data center. You have a lot of third-party fees. These can be content delivery, embedded software, embedded services. There are all kinds of pieces and parts your developers are using to build out your product. And that's a smart way to do it in most cases because they're doing it much cheaper than writing code themselves. In some cases, these services allow them to do things they couldn't do on their own with your own code. You have support costs, and you have to count those. The cost of supporting your customer is part of your cost of revenue. Customer onboarding costs, whatever expenses that you incur to get that customer up and going are considered cost of revenue. And credit card fees. Now there's a debate on this point. Old school accounting says credit card fees are a operating expense. You know, if you don't have a lot of them, I would agree. But if you've got a model that says you're getting paid $9.95 a month by 500,000 people, and you're paying 32 cents plus 3.3 points on $9.95, it's a big cost of revenue, right? That's a lot of money. I think it's like, what, 40, 50 cents a customer a month. That's like 6% or 8% of your total revenue. It's a lot of money. So you have to decide where that belongs. It's not a big point, but you're going to get into these kinds of discussions with people. Every revenue model I've seen has seasonality. If you're selling to large corporate America, I've got to tell you, trying to sell to them during December is a nightmare. They don't want to talk to you. Jason just started smiling. We're closing out our business for the year. And if you're John Deere, it's June you don't want to talk because we're closing out our fiscal year, right? Don't talk to us. And in general, don't talk to us between the holidays, the Western holidays starting a little before Thanksgiving and ending somewhere around the New Year. And if you're dealing with Asia, then you got Chinese New Year, which takes you sometimes towards the end of January. Forget it. You're not going to get anything done. In Europe, it is traditional to take the month of August as vacation. Very common. Forget it. You're not going to get any sales done. So the reason I say this, and I make a big deal out of this, is the most common mistake I see in a financial model provided to me as an investor is a nice, smooth slope of revenue. It just goes up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And it's like, really? How can that be? How can you sell more in December than you sold in November, which is more than you sold in October, even though you're selling to publicly traded companies that don't want to talk to you for 2.5 months? I'm not buying it, okay? And if you're selling in the retail space, holidays. We used to sell mobile computing systems to people that delivered beer. Well, let me tell you something about beer distributors in the summertime. There's only one thing they have time to do, and that's deliver beer. If it's a non-COVID year, they have everything they can do just to deliver enough beer to quench the thirst of Americans. They're not going to talk to you about putting a new computer on the route truck or buying a new system. They're just not going to do it. So I make a big deal out of this because it is a big deal. People blow it on this one. And it's not just because your numbers are wrong, it's because you don't know your market. You're telling me you're going to sell to Budweiser distributors, I'll pick on them for a minute, but you don't understand them. Have you even talked to one of them? You know, as an investor, it's a big turnoff, just a really big turnoff. So based on your market, so if you're in the ag space, most of them go a July, June year. I think it's July, June. If you're in traditional financial world, it's most likely a calendar fiscal. If you're selling internationally, it can be totally different. But understand the seasonality. Be ready to have a fairly in-depth discussion. If you get the second date, if you pitch a group or a person and they say, come talk to me for a couple hours, this will be one of the big discussion points, is tell me about the seasonality of your revenue. Okay, SaaS model valuations. Business valuations are different by industry and by business type. I'm not a valuation expert on anything. I'm not an expert on anything. My knowledge is mostly in the software space. So it's a multiple of annual reoccurring revenue. Now this multiple, whatever that multiple is, and we're talking a range of 5 to 10 and maybe even higher right now, there's a lot of things that influence the multiple you'll get. And so part of designing the company you're going to build and grow is thinking about what can I do to get my multiple nice and high? Seriously, why not? I mean, wouldn't you rather have a 10x than a 5x? So growth rate, margin, reoccurrence rates, barriers to entry, what I love, barriers to exit, I'll talk about those more in a minute, market share are all things that influence this. So reoccurrence rates or renewal rates. In ClinicNote, she's lost one university since she started. Out of, I think she's at 60 now. They don't leave. Once they buy this, they're done. Barriers to entry and exit. I'm a believer in barrier to exit. It's my own term, I think, but let me give you an example. A lot of you have used or know people that use QuickBooks. And QuickBooks is now an online product, and you pay somewhere between 20 and $100 a month for it, okay? And you probably use it because your accountant uses it and your tax preparer uses it. And because it's all in the cloud, that's all really easy. If I come to you with a super duper accounting system that's only $10 a month, half price, are you really going to move all your accounting stuff to save $500 or $600 a year or $120 a year? No. You're so embedded with that system. You're so dependent on it. And the cost of switching, that switching cost is so high, it creates a barrier to exit. That is why Intuit is worth ridiculous amounts of money. Okay, because once you start using Quicken and once it's all in there, thinking about switching would be an ungodly thought. So, let's see, I've got a question in here. If we have sold the software on a perpetual license, 50% of the customers to early adopters during the startup's early days, how do we accommodate in the financial model? Okay, so good question. So if we sold some software early on a perpetual license, it's basically one-time revenue. So you would account for it as a one-time revenue piece, and there'd be no reoccurrence. And you would have that as kind of a separate revenue item and explain it as such. Just say, hey, we had to do this to get a couple of lead customers that would be good referral points. Nothing really wrong with that, as long as you don't do too much of it, and as long as those couple customers aren't the majority of the market, if you will. So it's not a bad thing. Hope that answers the question. So typical valuations are 5 to 10 times ARR, annual recurring revenue. And there's about 5 ways of doing ARR. So is it ARR based on your best month? ARR based on an average of the last 6 months? So there's some minutia around what is ARR. But in general, I think the way most people look at it is if your revenue is steadily trending up overall, they'll look at an average of the last couple months or even the last month and say, we'll use that and we'll multiply it out by 12 to get to an annual run rate. Right now in the market, publicly traded software as a service companies are trading somewhere around a multiple of 15, not 5 to 10. And traditionally, private market valuations have run about 2 points below public. So right now, valuations on strong SaaS companies are very, very high. This is a chart on valuations, and I can tell you that line to the right there on the right edge has gone up dramatically in the last year. So this one went through 19. I haven't got one for 20 yet, but it gives you an idea of what the valuations have looked like. And this is on private SaaS companies. This is provided by a company called SaaS Capital, and I'll mention them several times in there in the appendix. If you want to read some really, really good information about SaaS model valuations and investing in SaaS-based companies, go to the company SaaS Capital and read their blogs. They're extremely well written. Here's a look at private versus public companies, so private in green, public in blue, and what their valuations have looked like and the way they've trended. And basically, it's just showing that the private companies trend a couple points lower than the public. And by the way, you'll notice the bottom, the x-axis is growth rate. So how fast you're growing is part of what drives your multiple. And it makes financial sense when you think it through. So to determine what your SaaS company is worth, find the current revenue multiple of a publicly traded SaaS company at a similar rate, growing at a similar rate as you. Subtract 2 to get the private discounted, and then multiply your company's trailing 12-month revenue by the discounted private SaaS company multiple. That is one of the methods. Very simple estimate, but if you're just trying to, what's my company worth? I'm going to end this year with $800,000 in ARR. What's it worth? Well, If comparables are running around 10 on publicly traded companies, you can pretty much believe that you're somewhere around a 7 or an 8 if you're comparable on other factors. And 8 times 800K is a nice number. So the key to the software business is a recurring revenue. It's all about the reoccurrence rate and the cost of, I will say, the cost of keeping it reoccurring. So we've talked through this several times, but estimating reoccurrence rates really, really hard. No one would have estimated the university market for ClinicNote to be a 99 or 5+% reoccurrence rate already. That's impossible to believe it'd be that high. I think few ever achieve 90%. If I was going to build out a company, if I was B2B, business to business, SaaS company, I would estimate somewhere between 75 and 85% as a conservative number. And then I'd work my butt off to make sure it was more like 85 or 90. But I'm not going to put the most optimistic valuations in. I want to plan for some failure, just in case. I have heard very few investors get angry for a startup doing better than they planned. All right, so that was step one. The revenue model is really going to define much of what your expense structure and your amount. So what remains? Product development, sales, marketing, general and operating, and people. So let's go through those. Product development cost. They are all of the costs to bring your product to market and maintain the product in the market. Don't forget maintain, right? You don't build software once and then you're done. It's very expensive to maintain it and keep it going, keep it up to date with new technologies, etc. Hardware is no better. So on the software development side, you've got all these costs for things like third-party APIs, libraries, contract development, user testing. You may be hiring UI, UX people. You may be hiring other forms of contract people. You have ongoing support. You have updates, certifications. And just to give you one example, there are probably 4 or 5 major browsers out there right now between Google's Chrome, Microsoft's Edge, Safari, and Firefox. There's 4. They change constantly. And every time they change something, it's very likely somebody's website broke or somebody's product doesn't work the same anymore. You're always making changes because of that. And things like, oh, we bought this third-party API to the service and the service just went broke. Or they got acquired and the company that acquired them shut down the product that we were using. Now we got to go find a new one and build it out. Product development, you get into things like design, development, packaging, production, certification, testing. So an example of a Lil Sidekick, that little tether product that had a little cardboard wrapper around it for hanging on the shelf. The cardboard wrapper, when got all said and done, when she got all said and done with that, got it through Walmart, got it approved, etc., about $35,000 to do that packaging. And that did not include the case packaging to case them up. So just know that it's not cheap to do that stuff at a level that's acceptable by somebody like Walmart for retail. Now, if you're selling it on Amazon, you can ship it in a brown box. Nobody cares because I made the buying decision based on what I saw online. What the box looks like, who cares? So from a hardware perspective, here's a simple plastic part. You're looking at $50,000 to $150,000. So in the case of Lil Sidekick, one piece of plastic, $50,000 to $100K for design, engineering, tooling, prototypes, pilot testing, certification, and packaging. And this will change over time. Tools break, packaging has to change due to government regulations, standards, store requests, etc. So the chart down here is just to show when some of these expenses are going to happen. You'll have design prototype early, then development tooling, test and pilot, then sell, and then scale. And by the way, when you're in a physical product, scaling usually means investing more money. So for example, if you're injection molding, when you start out, you make a tool that has one cavity, meaning you can make one part at a time. But there's a cost to actually cycling that machine and actually injecting that one cavity. You can make a tool that has 8 cavities, and it takes the same amount of time, energy, and labor to cycle the machine once and make 8 parts as it takes to make 1. So as you scale that physical product company, you may change your tooling to do 2 or 4 at a time. In fact, it's common to say if you really need an 8 cavity tool or 8 parts at a time, you would actually do 2 4-cavity tools, because then you have to mitigate the risk of the tool breaking. And if you're doing high volume and your tool breaks, you're in deep trouble. An electronics device, some of you know the company MakeYouSafe. They make a little sensor that sits on the arm. It's a safety sensor. It has a whole series of sensors inside of it. I think to date, rough estimates, they've got about 7 million in the hardware, 6 or 7 million total, making that one little computing device. And that was actually a very efficient build out from what I know, because I was in this business. It takes a lot of people, a lot of outside development contractors. You can't hire all the people you need here in Iowa or even in the United States to do this kind of work. You're going to very likely want a third-party manufacturer, and everything changes over time. Pieces and parts on the board go out of stock, they get end of life, all kinds of stuff. So these are kind of the timings you need to look at on a hardware company for money expenditures over time. So in software, you can be looking at anywhere from a couple $100K to 5 million up front to build out software. And then once you've done that, there is truly ongoing maintenance and upgrades. There are always new features, new upgrades that your current customers want. And by the way, when they get that bill every year, they want to know what you did for them new. You know, yeah, your product's valuable, but have you made it better? I'd like to have something better. We talked about browsers changing, standards change, compliance standards change, whether it's financial compliance, HIPAA compliance, e-commerce compliance, those all change over time. APIs change. There are many services you get through an application programming interface or API. Dwala is an API company. They sell a service to move money. Those APIs change over time, and when they change, your code changes. Partner companies go away or change business models. ClinicNote's had a billing partner for insurance billings, and I think we've changed that company 3 times now, and every time it costs 5 to 10 grand. Unexpected items such as Americans with Disability Act compliance for government-funded entities. There is software ADA, and if you don't have it correct, you may not be able to sell your software to the government. So when you look at the cost modeling of software, you've got that design and prototype early on, then development and improve that first 12 months, and then test and pilot, and then sell and scale. But look, you have development and improve constantly for the life of this product. You've got test and pilot constantly for the life of the product. It never stops. So when you think about the budget, if you will, for a software company, you really need to talk long and hard with your team about what the costs of maintaining and growing this software is going to look like over time. And by the way, this is your product, this is your marketing fuel to have new features, new options. And it's an old saying, but it's a lot cheaper and easier to sell an existing customer a new product. If Jason, for example, on this call is my customer and he trusts the product he has from me, one phone call or email can get me in the door to sell him another product or to sell him an upgrade to that product, and he'll pay more for it if it works. So a lot of money that's in startups and scale-up companies is to grow the wallets or the wallet share or how much money you get from a customer. I want more of Jason's money. Maybe he's spending 20 grand a year. I'd like to get him to 100 grand a year. And by the way, if I save him $500,000 while I'm doing that, he'll probably be okay with that 100 grand. That's probably a good thing. So just keep that in mind, that it's not just about getting new customers. You also need to have that plan to say, how am I going to keep and grow the existing customers I have? Because it's going to be a better financial situation for you if you can grow those existing customers while growing the new count. So summarizing product development, get help from somebody that's done it before. Find somebody that's built something similar to what you've built. There's a lot of people here in town that have built software. There's a lot of people here in town that have built hardware. There are certain specialty areas where there's not a lot of people in the area. One of my roles is to help you find those people. So if you're trying to figure that out, I'm happy to help. Get multiple bids and check references. Check references. I can't tell you how many disasters I've had to help try unwind because the person claimed a lot, but turned out couldn't do anything, or just took the money and ran. Plan for delays, failures, and problems. You're going to have them. Assume it. And by the way, if you assume everything's going to go right in your financial model, I probably am not your investor. So up next, sales and marketing expenses. You're going to have specific marketing software and sales software. There's a lot of software out there right now that makes marketing and sales much more effective. They're not cheap. If you're in the vertical markets, you'll very likely have trade shows. They have not gone away. And I can tell you that one of the things everybody's hoping will come back very soon once we have safety from COVID is trade shows, because we all get so much done at them. They're so valuable to both sides, selling and buying. There are all forms of advertising, from old traditional to e-commerce, web, and all the new forms that are inside social media. And then web development for the company website. Don't forget this. Along with your product, you need a company site. Now, it's gotten cheaper to do that. In fact, in some cases, there's tools like Weebly that pretty much anybody can run a PowerPoint deck, can build one out, but you've got to keep it up. Travel is a big part of everybody's budget when you're doing a startup. It almost always is, unless you're truly virtual and you can sell everything over the phone, which, by the way, some companies do. But just trade show travel alone. And even if you're going to be a virtual company and everybody's going to be remote, you're going to want to gather those people together several times a year for team building reasons. And so don't underestimate that travel. And by the way, in the vertical markets, conference speaking is one of the most effective marketing tools in the world. Somebody pays $1,000 to go to a conference and you're the speaker on a certain subject matter and you're the expert, and they paid to see you and you're trying to sell them something, and you get an hour of their time to convince them you're right. What a deal. And you get a free ride to the conference, or at least a ticket to the conference. So that's a great place to be. All right, the 4 steps, the easy step: rent. How much Quicken costs? What's my software bill for that? What's my legal bill going to look like? What's my financial costs going to look like? Banking fees, etc. Equipment. How many computers do I need to buy? What's my insurance liability? A lot of people forget this. Insurance in the startup space can be pretty expensive.
Hey, Mike, you had a question on the last screen about CRMs in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, Mike, it's Bernie from Bunker Labs. So we get a lot of companies that are going to need some type of a CRM software. And so there's a lot of free ones out there, and then you can go all the way up to the Salesforce and the cost there. Have you run across something that's a good starting platform to allow them to, which I think the CRM has so much utility, but yet once you pile all your data into there, again, the cost of switching and the nightmare that could be. Is there something that is a good platform that you've run across that can allow them to have a functional system that then may be adopted and when they have more revenue and can pay for a better product?
The answer is yes and no. Terrible answer. Yeah, but the problem is, and the value is that a lot of people are building vertical market CRMs now. CRMs for very specific use cases. So my suggestion is, if I'm starting a company and I'm looking for a CRM, I'm going to reach out to people, and probably the best place to do it is in social media, and different groups that are meeting that are in a like-minded place. So if you're business-to-business software, yes, there's several out there that are very, very strong, and I can give you some links to those, Bernie, on outside this call if you'd like. I don't have them off the top of my head, but it's really different depending on what kind of business you're going to run, and it's changing quickly. I've lost track of the name of the company, but I invested in a company recently that does CRM to a very, very specific market. And what's happened is things like Salesforce have become the CRM, but the problem is when they do everything for everyone, they're very difficult to configure. And while they might be great for a large company, I need to sell something this afternoon. I want to onboard this morning and sell this afternoon. So I need my CRM working by this afternoon. Well, if the CRM is very fitted to what type of business you do, I think that you'll find it to be a much more effective tool. So find one that fits your business. Beware of free, because you can spend a lot of your time and energy making the free one work. And if you just paid the $100 a month, you'd be out selling. So hope that answers your question. Thanks, Jason, for heads up on the chat. So anyway, insurance. If you've got a board, you need errors, and you need directors and officer insurance. If you're giving any kind of advice, you need errors and omissions insurance. You're going to need some form of liability. You probably need product liability if you have a physical product. If you have a couple very key people running the company and the investors are pretty wise in the early stage, we may ask those two people to buy life insurance through the company on each other, with the company as the beneficiary, to cover what would happen if we lose one of those people. Because if you lose your CTO, who's the brainchild of this product, you may lose a year. And as an investor, I never want to think about that, but what do we do for that year? So you may buy a very, very high cost or high value life insurance on that CTO that's term, fairly inexpensive, to cover that liability. That's very common. Things like phones, any of that kind of stuff, just your general expenses of running a business. The fifth step are people. Who do you need to hire and when? Are they contract full-time, and are you providing benefits? These are the three key areas you need to think through and look at. All right, let's talk about how much I should raise. This is just one of many ways to do it. There is no right answer. I will tell you before I go through this, I have sat in a room full of angel investors where 3 or 4 of them, we all listen to the pitch, and 3 or 4 of us say, you're not raising enough money. And 3 other people say, you're raising too much money. So there's no right answer. It really isn't. But let's take a physical product company and let's find the negative cash flow bottom. So what I've done here is I've started with product development and inventory needs. I added all the other startup expenses, and then I took my burn rate, the cost per, the net burn per month. So how much money am I burning every month? And in this case, $55,000. And I'm going to multiply that times 1.5 cell cycles. If my cell cycle is 6 months, what happens if I lose 1 whole cycle? And this happens. It's happening right now in some industries because we got an election next month. People are froze up. They're not going to do anything. 9/11 caused a huge bump. Anybody that had less than a year of cash on the books probably died during 9/11, or they had to go raise money and lose a lot of their, and give up a lot of their equity and get diluted. So in this case, we said I need $1,235,000 in inventory. I need $800K to develop. I need a $55K burn rate for 9 months. A 9-month sell cycle times 1.5. I need about $3 million, 2.75. Now, that's probably over several years, and you're probably not going to raise all that at once. So what you also could do is look at that and say, what do I need to get 12 months out to get to a key milestone that says I've really done something? And when you look at how much you raise, the more money you raise earlier, the more of your equity you're going to give up. So I might be able to raise, in this case, $800K by only giving up 14, 15% of the company. If I try to raise 2.7, I probably have to give up over half. So why not raise the 800K now to get through the first 12, 14 months to get to the point where, you know, your development's done, your prototypes are working, and your first customer said yes. Then when you go to raise the next amount of money, you're worth more because you're farther down the road. So I'm treating this at a very high level, but just understand there's multiple ways to decide how much cash to raise. This is probably one of the areas where I help people a lot in just the discussions that go on around how much should I raise, when should I raise it. And by the way, just like selling timing, investing timing matters. So for those trying to raise money right now, raising money after November 15th and before January 10th is a nightmare, because I'm going to do everything I can to not talk to you, right? It's holiday time. And I do have a couple of deals in the works. I'm going to work very hard to close those deals, but I don't want to start anything new during the holidays. Call me next. You're going to hear a lot of call me in January if you're trying to raise money in mid-November on. Now, different if it's friends and family, totally different friends and family time. They'll take your call, but for professional investors, probably not. All right. What I would suggest now, that is the end of the presentation for today. What I would suggest for those of you who would like to stay on the call, first of all, I'd take any questions that we have on the content. What I'm going to do for anybody that wants to stay on the call, I'm going to walk you through the financial model in Excel. And it's about a 10, 15-minute tour of the model. Honestly, it's really, really well documented. I actually spent quite a bit of time writing a user guide, if you will, for lack of a better term. And I'm going to repost the links to the model and the user guide out there for you. It's very straightforward. If you want to stick around, and I can take you for a tour. If you don't, not a problem at all. I'm going to make the offer again for any of you that would like me to help you with your model. Happy to do that. And don't feel like you've got to fill the whole thing out before you connect. That's not true. If you want to just say, help me figure out which revenue model to use, because there happens to be 3 of them in there, that's fine. Just, I would say, when in doubt, reach out. So, Jason, I know you got to take off. You take care. Questions, discussions, concern, what things I could do better before we get into the model itself. I'll take that as no questions. All right, well, give me a minute to
it's great content, Mike. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Bernie. Thank you for that. Just give me a minute to open up Excel here. My computer to cooperate, that would be helpful. You know, I don't know what it is about Zoom, but it has those overlapping windows that are always on top. And that's really frustrating when you're trying to do something and it does that. Let's see, let's stop the share on that. It's take me a couple minutes here. Should have had this queued up before we started. Sorry about that.
I love that picture in the background.
This one?
Yeah.
All right, well, it's at ikea.com.
All right, I have to check it out.
It's at IKEA. All right, let me share my screen. People laugh when I say that, but it's absolutely true. So the first thing you're going to see when you open up the financial model is it's going to say, this has macros in it. Are you sure you want to do this? And the answer is, yeah, you do. The only macros that are in here are for sorting. So nothing fancy, nothing you have to worry about causing problems. So go ahead and enable the macros. All right, so at the bottom here, you're going to see a whole series of tabs. I call them tabs, worksheets in the workbook, starting with the output, which is the P&L report in the lower left and the cash flow report. Okay, that's what you're getting out of your efforts. So literally on those sheets, there's nothing for you to do other than pick what year you want the report for. There's a tab to do general forecast. There is a tab to do actuals. So as you're moving forward, I recommend heavily that you put your actuals in each month as you close your month out. And the reason is raising money doesn't happen in 1 month, it happens over time. And you know, here we are in October. I want to see a P&L for 2020, and I want actuals from January through September. And then I want your forecast October, November, and December. So this is a way to do that. So it's a separate entry point. There are 3 tabs here: product sales, license sales, and client sales. That are 3 different revenue models. And I'll walk through each one of those very briefly today on the call. And there's something I call the data tab. We're going to start there. So in this model, can everybody see that okay on their screen? Okay. I use a couple colors. I use blue and I use yellow. The blue are things that are just text. The programmers call them literals. So for example, company name, Joe's Garage. By putting your company name in there, every report now has your company name on it. So you set it once, you forget it. You don't like the word revenue, you want to change it, go over here where it says revenue and type what you want. It'll change it in all the reports. Different languages, different markets, etc. Yellow are things you can enter. You're going to notice there's a padlock on every one of these tabs. P&L, cash flow, etc. They're all locked. If you know anything about Excel, you can lock a spreadsheet so that entry can't be done. And what I've done is use that to keep you from deleting all those nice formulas that are in the spreadsheet that make it work. If you want to unlock it, right click, say unprotect sheet. That's it. There's no password. Anything can be unlocked. When I protect it, the way you do that, when it comes up and asks for a password, you just say okay. And now it's locked again. So all these are locked, but anything that's yellow is still unlocked to you. So for example, it's not 2019 anymore, it's 2020. So by changing that, the beginning year for this model just became 2020, and it's a 5-year model through 24. You're going to pay benefits. Okay, we're probably really good benefits. We're probably looking at 19%. Payroll taxes, 6 sounds good. I want to start with $100,000 in cash. Okay, all those are entered there. Credit card fee, and then we talked a lot about revenue recognition. Don't worry if you're trying to figure out my cash model or a revenue recognition model. You can simply change it. And so you can say it's no, or you can say it's yes. So somebody says, I want to see it both ways, and I've had that happen. Change that no to a yes and run all the reports again. So that's really all you do on the data tab. Let's move on to different revenue models. This one called the license model is for high volume software licenses or other service type licenses. You can have, you basically name it. So product 1, whatever that is. I'm going to say that it renews monthly, renews every month. It costs $40. The renewal rate is 75%. I don't pay any commission, so I don't have to worry about the commission side. Let's say I did pay commission on a certain part of it. Let's say I'm paying a 20% commission on a third of the sales. This is common. It's like, how do I model that? Well, let's build into this. So what it's going to do is for a third of the sales, it's going to take a 20% commission. And then what you do from here on, you'll see 2020, and then on to 21 and on. You can scroll through this, but you're entering new sales right here. So let's say I sell 5 in January, 6 in February, 7 in March. Well, immediately you see that my 5 in January with a 75% renewal rate, 4 renewed in February for you. So that's automatically calculated. And then because we had a 5 and 4 is 9 net, in March we had 7 renewals. So you can see how a 75% renewal rate is not that great. Well, what happens if you go to 95%? Oh, it gets a lot better, okay? So each one of these products can add up to your total revenue. So if you said, I've got the same product and it's yearly, I can say, well, I'll sell one that's a 12-month renewal, same product for $250 a year, and we'll go back and make that 80. Nobody gets 95. I'm gonna go 85 on this one because annual renewals tend to do better. I'm gonna pay the same 20% commission on a third of the revenue. And then I'm going to say I sold 2, 3, 4, 2. Okay. So that's all it is to forecast your sales on a high volume. You can set a payment delay, meaning if they pay 2 months later, you set it to 2. If they pay when the sale happens, it's 0. If you are using credit cards, you'd set this to 100%. Okay. So if I go now to the P&L model, P&L report, change the year to 2020, you're going to see not only do I have subscription revenue coming through, but now I have third-party transaction fees coming through, and I have sales expense coming through from the commissions. And I have operating income, and I have net income. And you're going to see the impact, again, when I change it to 2020, of the cash flow. I said I started out with 100K, I'm already at 104 here. So the model, the idea of the model is that you're focused on your assumptions, and everything you enter in one of these yellow spaces is one of your assumptions. When somebody says, what are your assumptions? It's kind of a joke line because everything's an assumption early on. I'm not going to get into it here, but you can actually set up in the model that, let's say for the $250 version, you have a service where they can buy a one-time $49, I don't know, onboarding help. You can actually set it up and say, I want to trigger a fee on product, whoops, the yearly product. And I'm guessing that 25% of people buy the yearly product will pay the $49. It cost me $20 to do whatever that was, and it happens at the same time. This is really handy for onboarding expenses if people are paying to have help onboarding. If you're doing an add-on, if you will. So that's in there as well. So that's everything in this model. Again, not going to spend a lot of time here, but high volume, quick moving type stuff. Client sales is the absolute opposite. This is the I'm selling something to John Deere. So let's put John Deere in here. They're a prospect right now. I feel really good about them, so I'm going to say there's an 80% chance that they're going to close. I'm trying to close a $50,000 license that renews in 12 months. I'm not sharing, I can do a revenue share here and a commission percentage. And this is common to get into revenue shares and commission percentage. For the sake of today, I'm not going to do either one. I'm going to charge them a one-time onboarding fee of $5,000 to get this thing set up, and it cost me $2,000 to do that work. Well, it's John Deere, so they pay 2 months late. And I'm going to forecast that this sale is going to happen in the second month of, well, we'll make it 2020, just for fun, just because that's where the model's set up. Now, if I know this is going to come to an end, or I know I'm going to upgrade them, so let's say I know that if this goes well, I'll upgrade them next year. I'm going to say that this ends in the first month of 2021, and then I'm going to enter them again. I'll show you why. Okay, what I just did was I said they're going to end in 1 of 2021, and now they're going to start again in 2 of 2021, and they're never going to end because I'm selling them something that at first is a little bit cheaper, and if they like it, then they're going to pay the full amount. Well, that's really hard to forecast as a single line item. So I'm forecasting the discounted one, 50K, for the first 12 months, and having it end at the end of 12 months, and then having the full price one start there. When you don't put an end month, end year on one of these, it keeps renewing forever. So that's how the renewal is done. Now, what's happening with these 80s and 70s, if we went over and looked at the P&L, the 50,000 is not coming through, only 42,000 is coming through. And that, of course, is shown as a monthly. So the cash flow is showing, yeah, only 42,000 coming through rather than 50. So part of forecasting sales is not all the sales happen. And most sales organizations will have a likelihood to close number. And we use that in this model to say, look, just because you've estimated you're going to sell 11 clients in the next year doesn't mean you're going to sell all 11. Nobody's going to believe you. So this is just a way of saying, you know, I feel pretty good about it. In my last company, the way we did that is if there was a very successful demo, we'd set them at 40%. If we were in contracting, we'd set it at 70%. If we'd shipped the pilot and the pilot was working, we'd set it to 80%. Okay, so we were pretty conservative, but that was a way of figuring out, you know, estimating what overall revenue would be across a lot of deals. If you change this to contract, it ignores that number. Now it's 100% of the revenue. So when the sale happens, you just change prospect to contract. And this is a nice long sheet, so you put lots of customers on here. And I know how much of a pain in the butt it is to do these forecasts, having done them, but I can also tell you as an investor, I want to know who your clients are. I'm going to ask you and say, Mahesh, can you give me a list of your clients for next year, who they are and how much you expect to get from them? This can be pretty damn impressive when you just go, sure, let me print it for you. And it has the timing in there and it matches your model because most people don't have that. And so my background in marketing and working with sales made me want to take a sales forecast sheet and turn it into the financial forecast. Product sales, unless you're in the physical products, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because this is complex, but this is a way to model physical product sales with different minimum costs or minimum quantities and different cost structures. So if I buy 100, it's $3. If I buy 500 at a time, it's $2, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all built in here. And the instructions are pretty clear on how to set this up, but because most people aren't doing that kind of thing, I'm not going to spend a lot of time there today. Okay, the team sheet. Team sheet's pretty straightforward. Janitor, I'm having a little fun with you. That's me. Let's make that Mike. And primarily operations expense. So G&A. And secondary sales. I'm being silly here. Will make me the CEO. So I'm G&A and sales are my two main roles. And I spend 50% of my time doing sales. This is important because most investors are going to want to see your team sheet, who's on your team, who's coming on your team going forward, what are you going to pay them, what are they going to work on? I don't know anybody in a startup that only does one thing, right? I mean, the marketing people are doing some support, sales people are doing some marketing, the programmers are helping with support. So you may budget all their time to do one thing, but in reality, you'll hire people that do different things, to do both marketing and customer support. You can set these people as full-time or contract, start month, start year, just like what you saw on the sales sheet. So they're starting in 2 of 2020. We're not going to put a stop year on them. We're going to pay this person $50K a year, and we're going to give them a 3% annual raise. Okay, that person's set up. So this is just a list of all your employees. And over here, you'll see two numbers. You may, if you're hiring a significant number of people, let's say you're hiring 8 or 10 people, I like to put about $1,500 in here just to pay for a PC, a good chair, that kind of stuff, even if they're working at home. If you've ever had, like we all have now, sit in a chair all day, the chair is a good thing to have. And then a lot of people are paying, you know, $75 a month for phone internet. So rather than buying a phone for the business, like, look, Mahesh, here's $75. That's to cover the business use of your phone and the business use of your home internet. So this will automatically put this in the expenses for you. So you don't have to mess with that. The rest of the forecast is done over here. And this runs with exactly matches the P&L sheet. So except for the very top, this is where you put in any new investment. If we raised $500,000, oops, I'd put it there. Let's say somebody gave me a $20,000 grant, I'd put it there. Otherwise, all of these, you'll notice all the sales expenses are already coming through, the numbers in white. You don't have to worry about them. They're already done from the team sheet. You can add your other sales expenses here. That might be your sales software. It may be some other things you're doing, travel related to sales, et cetera. Same thing with marketing expenses. If we put a marketing person in, all their costs would be here. This is where you put in all the other marketing expenses, again, software related, et cetera. Product development, you'll often have outsourced hardware, outsourced software. You'll have all your own people up above, and then you'll have the additional R&D expenses outside of that. Cost of goods, You need to track your hosting expense. You may have some customer support expenses that aren't related to your staff. If you set your staff as customer support full-time, they'll hit your cost of goods. And then same with engineering support. If you're doing physical product, you'll have engineering support. These are all the numbers that came from your operational people that came through. And then these are those other categories we talked about: legal, banking, finance, et cetera. And this is all just that same concept of just scrolling through year after year. Gets you down to your total operating income, et cetera. So that's what gets you to this P&L. You'll notice that here I've got subscription software revenue, product revenue, professional services revenue. If you're trying to clean this up and you wanted to get rid of that product revenue, the simplest thing to do is unprotect the sheet and simply hide that row. Now it doesn't look like a hardware model, and you can do that with any of the areas you're just not going to use. Same, and then cash flow report, again, all done. Now the way these reports work, you want a 2021 report, okay, just change the number up there to 2021, and then these are PDFable. Just when you say file print, they'll come up and be fully formatted for a sheet of paper. That is the 15-minute tour or 10-minute tour of the model. Any questions?
Small question on the team sheet for the monthly expenses.
Yep.
I see the phone internet. Can this, if you wanted to add like another category or something like that, is that possible, or do you just have to sort of?
If it were me, I mean, yeah, what I would do is I would just put in the grossed up amount here, you know, whatever it is. Let's say total is 325, and I'd make a note somewhere of what you did. I mean, that it's just a place to have a reoccurring monthly number, right? So keep in mind, though, if you're worried about how you categorize your expenses, you know, it could be a little, some people get nitpicky about that. Early days, nobody cares. Down the road a ways, categorize your expenses correctly.
Thanks.
Hey, Mike, quick question. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I've been working with this. We have a company. We started it probably a year ago, and we went through the prototype production, and we actually went from having the idea, making the prototype, and actually selling out of the prototype. But along that road, we found out a lot of things about how we should market, what we can say, what we can't say. So this is a hand gel, something like a cosmetic that has therapeutic benefits. So we found out that we had to design the product in such a way that we need to market it in a certain way. And what we're trying to do is, based on the prototype experience, we're trying to raise an initial seed amount, sort of in the range of like 500,000. So I really like the spreadsheets that you have, but how would you deal with a prototype model and the revenues that you generated with that prototype to be able to say, okay, you know, we did this with the prototype, so based on this, we can do A, B, and C with the actual product when we come out?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't worry about putting those prototype expenses and revenues. I probably wouldn't model all that up. I'd probably do a summary statement separately of just, hey, we spent 600 grand, we did this, here's what came out of it. Here's a simple P&L from that, and then build a model of what you can make happen.
Okay. So based on that, so the model that we think we can do, I think that's where I'm sort of stuck on. I totally understand the first part you said, because we can do that. I know what we did and how we did it. It's right. Trying to project from that is where I'm having like a block, because it's a hurdle, because just trying to get numbers and saying, okay, can we do this? What sounds reasonable, what sounds unreasonable is where I'm stuck at.
Usually, especially in more of a consumer space, you try to find a like product and find out information on their growth. Okay. Because there's not a lot new about consumers. There have been consumers since bartering was a thing, since people that didn't have language skills traded things. Sure. You know, that's not new. So using the experience of the past. So I would be talking to people in complementary markets, selling to the same customer a complementary product at a similar price point, and say, hey, how'd it go for you? And you know, the funny thing is companies that are scaling up are really good about talking to each other. If I'm not your competitor and you're in the same space as me, I actually want to talk to you. Really? You're doing that? Cool. Can I talk to you about that? So don't hesitate to reach out to the CEOs or CFOs of complementary companies and say, hey, I'm doing a startup. We sell to the same company, but customer, we're a very complementary product. I could really use just some advice and help. And you'll find most of them are really helpful people, more so than you ever think, amazingly enough.
All right. No, I think that's great advice. I will try that. Yeah.
Large companies won't do that, but small companies will.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So,
I will definitely give that a go. I think that'll really help because, like I said, I'm sort of stuck at that sort of projecting a reasonable model as opposed to something unreasonable. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, great.
And if I were looking at your model, Mahesh, I would ask you, my questions would be, you know, no matter what you put in there, tell me about your flexibility. If it goes faster than you expected, what's your time to flex up? So if you're forecasting, let's say you're forecasting selling, I don't know, 3,000 units a month. So Mahesh, let's say we hit June and some big customer says, I need 10,000 units a month.
Right.
How quick could you do that?
Yeah.
What's that involve? And how detrimental to your supply chain is it? Is there unlimited base resources? Is there a limit on any of your suppliers to being able to step that up? That's the question I'm going to have. I know what happens if you don't make your number, right? We all know what happens when it doesn't work. But the question is, can you grow? And in the consumer space, that's hard. In the software as a service space, it's a lot easier because I just go onto AWS and provision up a whole bunch more servers and keep going and pay a bigger bill. But to some point, there's still scaling issues and making that simplified. But when you're talking about a physical product, the company that's fulfilling for you, that's filling the tubes, can you get more bandwidth in that company? Are they fully utilized? Do they have excess bandwidth? Are they, you know, are they a prototype only company and they can't do high volume? Do you have to switch to high volume? And that's really common in the space you're in.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate. I think that last comment you made was just right. I hadn't actually thought of that, but now I'm sort of thinking sideways and other ways that we can check this out. But thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
Sure.
This model is SaaS focused. Do you have other ones that could be product or service focused?
It's product focused. So Bernie, I'd be happy sometime to take you through doing products on this tab. So this product sales model is a totally non-software. It's physical product. It can be anything from the simplest product to fairly complex.
Okay. I'm just looking for something that has broad applicability for the people who come through.
And I don't know that this is it. Honestly, I really don't know this is it because it does both. You know, if you've got a lot of people coming through and I know what you do, I'd be happy to help create something that's just product only. It would be that hard to just basically hide away a bunch of the sheets and hide a few of the rows, and you'd have a product only model.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to do that with you. Other questions?
Mike, I'm not sure if I caught it earlier, but actually, first off, great to see you, and thank you for the presentation. But I'm really curious to see if you could share those documents with us.
Yeah, have you been in the chat?
No, not yet.
Okay, so I'm going to go into the chat. Do you have access to the chat now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will paste all that back out there. Hang on just a second.
Awesome, thank you.
Of course. Sorry, Zoom is just driving me nuts today. I'm not having a good day with Zoom here.
Hey, no worries, it happens sometimes.
All right, here's a bunch of information for you. This is the financial model template, the user guide for today's presentation, appendix file, my email address, and the homepage for the seminar. And the most important one's my email address. If you can't find something, send me an email.
Awesome. Shout out. Thank you once again.
Yeah, no problem.
See you soon, Mike.
All right, take care.
You too.
Other questions? I think that's it. So I think unless there are any other questions, I will go ahead and bring this to an end. I want to thank everybody for the time today. You've been a good group. And again, I would encourage anybody to reach out to me. Got my email address there. You can always find me at through the partnership website, dsmpartnership.com.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike. It's been, it was
Thank
a
you,
real
Mike.
education.
All right, take care, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks again, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.